Welcome back. It's episode 3 of Rewiring Prosperity, the Lighthouse Series with a focus on our project Win BC, where we're celebrating success stories of women securing venture capital in Atlantic Canada. I'm your host, Vanessa Paesani. If we're serious about changing who gets funded, we have to look at how founders are being trained to navigate capital in the first place. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Ellen Farrell. Dr. Farrell is a professor at the Sobey School of Business at St. Mary's University and the creator of Investor Q&A, one of the most widely recognized training programs for women raising venture capital. She specializes in venture capital and entrepreneurship with a focus on closing the gender gap in Canada's funding landscape. Her work sits at the intersection of research and practice. She's coached venture capital teams to outperform top global institutions like Yale and MIT, and her students have gone on to raise hundreds of millions in capital. She's also been recognized as one of Canada's top mentors by BDC. Ellen's not just studying the system, she's actively equipping women to navigate and succeed within it. In this conversation, we get into what's really happening in investor founder dynamics, how bias shows up in the room, and what founders need to do differently to raise capital successfully. So let's get into it. Welcome, Dr. Farrell.
Thanks for having me here today, Vanessa.
So I know that you've studied and trained hundreds of founders. What actually happens in investor Q&A that founders aren't prepared for?
Well, I would say the biggest thing is that the excitement that they feel when they realize that, somebody's sharing what they've been thinking, and that when they look at the science of what we're doing here, that it matches with what they've been thinking about. And so, we have a lot of people like right in the very middle of the kickoff that are like, wow, this is just so amazing. This is what I've been thinking. And now it's here, it's in science, and we can work with that. So it's really, exciting to see how excited they are, and then, they're really wrapped with attention.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you just mentioned like the science piece of it, and I know that your platform is science and research backed. So what patterns has research demonstrated in how investors question women or female founders versus men?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And, lots of people kind of suspected this or they felt this way, and not just in venture capital, but, they would be, working with a group and the men would get up and do their part, everything would be fine. The woman would get up and then bang, right? There would be all these like really difficult technical questions, kind of putting you in a defensive posture. Sort of thing, but the research has shown all over the place in many, many different ways that women are asked different questions than men are. They're asked the kind of questions that you would normally be asking of, maybe the CFO or the COO or, not the CEO, right? So kinda technical, detailed, um, questions that are, not looking in the forward vision of the company, and that's what venture capital is all about, right? It's about building a great company. It's about the vision of being able to kind move forward, the vision of being able to see what you're doing. So, the research shows with it's in universities, it's in, venture capital, it's in all kinds of industries, it's in interview rooms that women are treated differently in these situations, and so that unconscious bias, is there.
Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting, and I know your platform's called Investor Q&A, and I've had the chance to be trained in it and see the back end. But for those that haven't, maybe you could tell us a little bit about like what's happening in the platform, because I know you do the training, but then there's also this platform where people can practice. And by people, I mean, for the most part, women or female identifying people, and they're can go in the background and practice their pitch and get real time feedback. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's happening in the background for them.
Right. So, you brought up training, in the first thing, and that's we're not mentoring and we're not coaching, right? Which is where you can kinda sit there, you can listen to what's going on, you can kind of do nothing, you can work on some other stuff at the same time, right, and you can walk away and use the advice or not. Investor Q&A is training, right? So, I liken it to, a pilot. Nobody wants to go up in the air with a pilot who's been coached and mentored, right? Everybody wants to go up in the air with a pilot who's been trained. And so, the console was built to help, women come to understand the kinds of questions that they're going to be asked and how to deal with those questions, and they get to practice them out loud in their own kind of like private space. So nobody can hear them, nobody can see them, nobody's watching them. And then the console will transcribe the answers that she's providing to the various questions. And so now she's got something to look at. She actually knows what she said. And she can go back and, kind of review that, but there's also feedback in the console, and the feedback in the console is based on the science that we know, and so it's saying, like, "You're spending too much time, talking about these kinds of things, and you need to spend more time talking about these kinds of things." And so it's, very, very, specific feedback, and then in addition, the console h houses all of our materials. So the glossary, the instruction manual, videos that are there that kind of give another heightened sort of discussion about some perhaps difficult topics and so on. And so it's really, a very kind of comprehensive thing, and people get really excited. They get really excited when they see that they're really gonna have an opportunity to kind of talk out loud and then get feedback on it privately. And then later on, we can, kinda look at it together and give some insights and give some feedback and give some kind of opportunities for them to kind of figure out, yeah, I need to do more of this, I need to do more of that, and I don't know much about that, so I'm gonna go learn that area. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned in the glossary you have, and I've seen it, you have the wait, I think are framed as prevention words and then aspiration words. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Right. So the research showed that there are some topics where when you're talking about them, you're moving towards investment. And other topics, when you're talking about those, you're moving away from investment. And once again, this is, kind of really, very spectacular science. And so, we're encouraging people, make sure you know about those topics that are positively correlated with investment. So you need to know about your end users. You need to know about your value proposition. You need to know about your launch strategy and the momentum and a variety of topics like that. That once you kind of know, okay, those are key topics that you want to make sure are in your lexicon, right? They're part of your repertoire. That when you're practicing or working on building that, what you look like and what you sound like and what you come across like in a venture capital environment, then you've got the things that you need to work on.
And I know the title or the name Investor Q&A, it's really about the owning the question and answer period of the pitch as well. And so as you think about this training program that you've built, what are the most critical skills founders are missing when they walk into a pitch and the pitch being also the Q&A period?
Yeah, that's a good question because everybody practices the pitch. They develop their pitch deck and they practice the pitch repeatedly. It's rehearsed repeatedly. And so they're normally very good at it, right? Once you've done it and you kind of get comfortable with the kind of sort of competitive environment, if there's other people around or there's other people who are doing the same thing. So, so that aspect of the fundraising process is normally well executed by women. But the question and answer period is like really their worst nightmare, even if they don't feel that way. Often they, because they haven't practiced the answers to very specific questions out loud, they're not well equipped to answer them. And so the the Q&A part is where investors make their decision. And so that's why it's called investor Q&A, is because you want to be great at the part where they're thinking, am I going to have another meeting with her? She's looking really good. I'm liking what she's saying. She looks like a leader. She's doing all these things. And so that's that's a very kind of specific component that you want to be really good at. And it's worth spending a considerable amount of time developing it. When you think about the amount of time people like, massaging minute little things inside their pitch deck and everything. And yet that's just kind of giving them an idea of what your innovation is. Where all the decisions are gonna be made then is after that. It's like, wow, does she have the business acumen, and does she look like a leader? So there's 3 things that you need, right? You've already got the innovation, but the thing that l most women need support with is the presentation of the business acumen. Not that they don't have it, but the presentation of it, and then a couple of qualities that are designed to kind of really make you look like a leader. Right. Not just somebody who's a founder, but a leader, somebody who can build a great company.
That's really, really great, and I know that we're running one of these, cohorts right now, and, there's always, great questions about that in the groups that come up. Is there one, like, as you've run multiple of these groups, is there one question that you hear the most often from founders?
The question I hear the most from them, well, everybody seems to be pretty, tied up in the, "Well, I can, like, learn about this." But sometimes, they really wonder whether they have to practice it out loud as much. And I have this feeling that women are building their businesses in isolation, not total isolation, but they're not talking out loud about it a lot. And so if you're going to talk about your vision, right, you need to have said that out loud 100 times in order for you to become comfortable with it and to build it to, a level or a layer of an answer that's going to have detail in it, that's going to be meaningful for the person who's listening. And so, I had lunch with a VC just last week, and he couldn't tell me what her name was, he couldn't tell me where she lived, couldn't tell me what her business was, because all that's, was confidential from him. But he said, like, "I got a vision from her," right? He said, "I could see what her plan was and how she was going to build this company." And that was really meaningful. He was really impressed with that, right? And so we know that vision, it could because it's kinda like the affirmation stuff. If you can't see it and you can't talk about it, if you don't say it out loud, it's almost like, you think if you think it's going to arrive, at the moment somebody asks you the question, that you're going to have the answer for it. It's not going to happen like that. Most people who raise venture capital have been answering a lot of questions over a long period of time out loud, right?
Out
And
loud, yeah,
practicing. Yeah.
and practicing, yeah, because I know your console has, mm, like, most of the standard questions that people would get, and then you respond to them multiple times.
Mhm. And part of being a leader, which is the third quality, right? Gotta have the innovation. You have to know about the business, but then you have to look like the leader. And the leader is the person who controls the conversation. So when they see somebody in front of them who's not just answering and then waiting for a question to come, answer that, wait for another question to come, answer it, wait for another question to come. It's not like that, right? She's got to, if she's going to lead a company, hire piles of people, take millions of dollars of investment and deploy those, she has to know how to kind of lead a conversation. And now she's got those topics, they're in her pocket. She's practiced them out loud and she can answer a question and then she goes on. and she keeps talking about important things that they need to hear, but they're not asking, right? Because she's a woman, she's not getting the easy questions. She's getting the hard, difficult questions, and they're designed to kind of put you in the defensive mode.
I remember, I think I've heard you say, it's like you still answer that question, but then you take that opportunity to I don't know what the right word would be, but maybe turn the question around to kind of answer the question that you didn't get around the aspirational part of the whatever was in the nugget of the question.
Right, and we see this all the time with very successful people, right? So somebody's interviewing them, let's say, and, they answer the question and then they just keep on going with other things they need the audience to hear, and yet they're not being asked. And so they do that, and then when they finish, kind of that topic, if they have something else and there's no other question on they're gonna move on to that. Like, and these really, like, wonderful, kinda compelling people that we're drawn to because they have a bit of a charm and a charisma, but they're telling us stuff that that we wanna hear the answer to, but we're not asking or that are not being asked, in the context of the interview, and so that's what leaders do. Leaders have that ability to say, "These are the things" without saying this, "These are the things that you need to know about what we're doing here." Right.
I like that. I feel like we maybe saw that in the Olympics this year with the questions to the skier, the Chinese skier Eileen Gu, I believe was the pronunciation of her last name, but she kind of took the question and was like, "Yeah, so this isn't the best question. Let me kind of redirect that and own the conversation." And she for sure owned the internet, and I remember being very impressed by that.
Uh-huh, that's right, and, yeah, so it's a really good quality to have, right? Not to just be, dictated to, "Here's a question, you have the answer. Here's a question, you have the answer. Here's a question." Because if the questions that they're asking you are all the, kind of like obstacle types of questions, you need to have all that great information about what your vision is and about, what the launch strategy looks like and when it's taking place and where your momentum is and how your revenues are generating and those you need to be talking about those things, and if they're not asking you, you only have, like, 8 minutes, maybe, right? To be able to, and so you've gotta make a point of making that stuff apparent, and, the very first question that you asked is about, like, what do women, kinda really get out of this? They are so excited about that when they realize that it's kinda changing their psyche a little bit. Right, it's not like I'm the defenseless person waiting for the questions now, I'm leading the charge, and when they have good things to talk about and they've practiced and they've worked on those things, with investor Q&A, that's what we're doing, we're helping them build all these things, then, kinda now they're excited. Right, and then, then at the end, at the end of the whole thing, is the last question, kind of like on the last day, somebody will say to me, "Okay, how am I gonna find these people?" This is like a whole new, kind of realm of material being developed for, how do I find them, and how do I get in touch with them, and how do I make sure that I'm, saying the right things and getting the right things in there, so it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you've been in this space for a while and you've trained students and you bring them to pitch competitions and now you're doing training through investor Q&A. I was wondering as we think about like the systems change of all of this, like how much in your view is on the founder to adapt and how much is on the system to change?
I think about that a lot, when I was first, concerned about the women issue, and just, for the people who are listening, if you didn't know, like, it's about 97% of the money goes to men and about 3%, and it's worse in the States, and it's worse in the UK, surprisingly. I was surprised by that. Um, and so I don't, I wrote proposals, right? I'm a university professor. My PhD is in venture capital, and I wrote proposals to, to kind of work with what we call the limited partners, right? And the limited partners are the big, kind of institutions and organizations and so on that provide the money to the venture capitalists for the venture capitalists to invest. And we talk a lot about, venture capital and how it works in the system and why you're not losing your equity when you invest with a venture capital. But and nobody wanted to fund, right, that kind of a work. And I don't know that you could have done any, kind of widespread change with that. It's, so my feeling was if I want women to get some money, I'm going to have to help them understand how to sidestep unconscious bias, how to sidestep it. And so that's what we're doing. Here's that question. Yep, I'm going to answer it, and then I'm going to move on. I'm going to tell you something else that you're not asking me, right? And so by sidestepping it, they can raise money now, and $30 million later, right? Women who have taken investor Q&A have raised $30 million, in that last, 2.5 years, that the program was funded by mostly major women's organizations and groups that are very kind of concerned about the issue. And so, really, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. It is exciting. And if someone is listening and preparing to raise capital in the next, let's say, like 6 months or up to a year, let's say, what's the one thing that they should start doing right now to improve their chances?
Well, yeah, I would say first of all, start thinking about the vision, right? Like the fact that venture capital is there. What can you do if you had unlimited amounts of money? Like venture capitalists they have hundreds of millions, they have billions of dollars. And so, the notion is that what can you build if you had unlimited amounts of money and your initiative? Right? And so, kind of you have to think about that. You have to kind of see where something could go and say, well, if this kind of came to its natural right, and then if we looked at like this market over here, then we could do that. And then if we were kind of, a part of another component, and then so you can kind of see, like, about 8 years in the future about what would be possible. Right. And so that's, something that a lot of people don't spend much time. They're kind of, they're down in the details right now, and they have to be, right? You have to be there. But, if you're gonna be talking to investors, you may as well take that opportunity to show them that you have a vision. You're not just trying to build a little gadget here or anything like that.
Yeah, I like that. And and to close, if you were to think ahead, like, what do you think it will take for us to actually close the gender gap in venture capital in Canada? And maybe you want to take it beyond Canada because I know we're, maybe fairly small players in this, but either in Canada or beyond.
Yeah. Um there are a lot of women funds now. They are uh, intended to invest in women, but there's not enough of them to even kind of make a small dent. They opened up $1 billion fund for women down in New York, and it didn't even kind of like move the needle from like on a national context. And so I don't know that I have, short of changing our social, our political, our, kind of religious, our work norms. I don't know how you change all of that. But as more women kind of make their way there's some really good research out of Harvard, Ayers Brophy, I think was her name. And she said when enough people get to a certain level, then and they're together, then things can change in that little area. So, for example, let's say you're talking about a boardroom, right? Well, if you have, one woman's not going to make a difference. She's going to vote the way everybody else votes, two women, three women, four room. By the time you get to maybe 40, 50%, then they might start feeling comfortable to kind of, vote their own way. I mean, if you stop and think about it, I mean, Amazon was built. What was Amazon? It was like a bookstore. That's kind of a woman's sort of business. But, it got fun, that's where that one ended up, and Zappos, what was Zappos, right? Zappos was like women's shoes, and so there's all kinds of these things that people keep saying, "Oh, that's kind of women's things," or whatever, but if a man does it, it's all right, right? So I don't have the answer to that one, but I do know, that my time on this earth is, limited, and I'm gonna try and raise just as, many people as I can who wanna raise funding so that, we can equip them with that method, right? Of coming across like somebody who's a real bona fide, leader and understands the topics that you need to talk about.
Well, and maybe I might ask one additional question to relate it to, once we get the critical mass, like who are the top maybe 3 female founders that you're following in Canada right now?
Oh, well, we've got, there's, several, kinda good people in the food business, right, that I've had, exposure to. There's a woman who came up from, she's in one of the cohorts that is in your group. She came up from Dallas to work in, Cape Breton, for the kind of industrial, capacity that Cape Breton had, that memory of, capacity. There's a couple of people coming out of BC now, that I have, kinda worked with, and they have some good women's groups out there as well. And, they seem, very, very, competent, and, one of them is in kind of a gaming business, and she came from a couple of big startups, right? So so she'd been in those startups when they started. So, yeah, so I'm, went right across the country, right from Cape Breton Island out to, BC and in between.
I love that. Yeah, and just maybe just to close, I'll note that one of our partners on the Win BC project is We BC, and they're offering this training as well. And so I know that they work with tons of groups, and they have quite a strong ecosystem. And they've shared some of the innovations coming out of BC, and that's gone through their program, and they're all people that I'm following as well. They sound
Oh,
super
yeah, good.
exciting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I enjoyed it, like, to kind of, work all your way through your entire career, past 35 years now, and then kind of come right towards the very end, to this opportunity where it's, like, such an immense capacity to be able to help people in an area that was like just like, what are we supposed to do? And they're helping themselves now. It's really exciting. Couldn't have thought of a more gratifying way to, kind of build a career at this stage.
I love that. Thanks so much for your time and expertise, Dr. Farrell. I really appreciate both what you've built as well as the work and the support that you've given us in this project as well. So thanks so much.
You're welcome, Vanessa. And, I really appreciate all of the good work that you folks are doing. We're kind of in the same area and we're all interested in the same things. And I just love to see really honest, hardworking people that are trying to kind of move the needle.
Yeah, a rising tide raises all ships. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Aha.
that's a
That's
good way
it.
to end.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks so much to Dr. Ellen Farrell for that great conversation. If you're interested in learning more about the platform that she's built, you can find it at www.investorready.org. That's investor ready, or you can type in investor Q&A into your search. If you'd like to follow along to the podcast, we have some exciting episodes coming up. You can find us online at pond-deshpande.ca slash win dash VC. And then follow us on your podcast channel of choice. Hope to see you in the next episode. And thanks so much for joining us today.